Okay, so we are going to run through some of the additional questions that we had from the webinar last week on how to build battle cards that salespeople love. Vincent, I'll run through some of these questions and then we can riff on the answers together, but you can definitely take the first shot.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with number one. First question is, are battle cards generally useful for proposal teams?
That's an interesting question. That's a good question. I think the answer is always going to be yes, that people who are responding to RFPs will be responding in the context of the competition, in the context of the market. And so whatever information that battle cards and competitive intel that they would have access to will be useful. I think the content of the battle cards for proposal teams would be different. It would be informational, it would be positional, but it would be less conversational than what we would typically create for sales-facing battle cards.
Less conversational just because it's not going to be used like in conversation. It's going to be used for documents and proposal
it's
writing.
going to inform how you write, how you position things, right?
What sort of well, yeah, I'm just kind of curious about that because I mean, I truthfully haven't seen battle cards for proposal teams before. So when we're looking at like a normal set of 8 cards or whatever you're going to include in your battle card, do you have any thoughts on what specific content you would cover in those battle cards?
Yeah, I think in those type of battle cards, what's going to be most important are going to be things like depositioning, strengths and weaknesses, pricing, lot more of the informational side of go-to-market deployment strategy, services, support. Those are the type of things that are important in an RFP, and less so in terms of the specific conversations that you would have to position and handle objections. The other parts that are actually really, really useful would be lane-mindy type of content. Knowing where the competition's weaknesses are and how you go about attacking and how you go about phrasing certain things is really important in an RFP. I think the fun part about battle cards for RFP teams and proposal teams is that they will need to have access to multiple battle cards on every vendor that is expected to be responding to this RFP.
Gotcha. I have no additional thoughts on that, Vincent, but that seems like a useful answer to me. So I think we can jump to the next one. The second question, do you have any kind of regular CI communication with customer-facing teams? This is a good one for you to answer.
Very regular. Regular to the point where it's almost on a daily basis, but at the very minimum on a weekly basis. So we do a couple things. One is sending out a newsletter on a regular basis, be it on a weekly basis or at the minimum on a monthly basis, just to let customer-facing teams and really like all internal stakeholders know that things are happening. We're actually paying attention and we're keeping track. And it's also a really good opportunity for you to expose issues and questions that you are raising and seeing and that you need additional internal input on. So one of the biggest challenges that we have on the CI side is there are things that you're seeing and hearing, but they might be intermittent signals. So can you actually get more internal signals to help validate, to support, to sometimes invalidate a particular opinion you might actually have? And these regular communications is a two-way street. Like it's a way for you to inform the teams on what's actually happening and also inform the teams on what you think might be happening, but you need their help to tell you other signals that help inform whether that particular situation is happening, unfolding or not.
When it comes to communicating with CS teams and enabling them, what are the different like forms of content that you're using or forms of engagement? Is it like newsletter? Is it battle cards? Is it actually like in-person meetings? Like is there different formats of content that you would look at to enable CS with as opposed to sales?
I think the formats could be fairly similar. because again, it's a case of, for most CS folks, they will be treating competitive content the same way as a sales person, which is, I'm going to look for stuff when think I need it.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is going to be the types of content they actually need. It's going to be more of the identification side of things, and also on the position side of things.
When you
Less
say
so than
identification, you mean like helping them to identify when a competitor is like maybe interacting with one of their clients and like coming into the picture?
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
a place for them to look up the types of keywords that they should be listening for. But in terms of enabling the customer success folks on the whys of the types of keywords that you're looking for, that's when you can't depend on just a piece of collateral and piece of content that they read through. You actually have to spend some time with them in enablement session, in training sessions, in a conversation to explain, this is what we're looking for, this is why, and here are the types of situations where it might happen. And what you will see a lot is, as soon as you have that conversation, then there will be a CS manager who say, oh, I've heard this before. Now I realize that this competitor was actually trying to come into my account.
So you said the types of content that would be most relevant to CS would be the identification of competitor type of battle card, the depositioning type of battle card. Was there other content you wanted to add to that?
And CS people tend to want to know more about how things will work in a competitive solution, and how things might be different. So there, it's a little bit more about, less about positioning of your product, but more of a, here's a perceived strength of their product and how a customer might interpret things, but here's why it's not something that matters, right? So again, for the CSI, it needs to be much more on the whys of things that you're hearing from a prospect, from a customer. Here's why it's actually not as important in the repertoire as a prospect or as a customer might think it would be.
Are you talking specifically about like the platform or product? Like here's why
It will be product oriented. Yeah.
So it's way more, is the information that you're providing way more about details around product and feature sets at the customer success level?
Yes.
Yeah, because you're actually having clients like come up against maybe their own frustrations with the product. Okay. Is there any other thoughts on what you've seen be successful when it comes to enabling CS team?
That's a good one. I think at this industry, we're just beginning to explore that. I think we have historically as an industry, we have kind of treated CS as I guess an extension of the sales team, in the sense that you just get what the sales team actually gets, and we didn't really consider what is really important in their conversation with customers.
Right. So now it's about trying to figure out what are the nuances of information that a CS team really needs to be successful, and how could that be slightly different from maybe what we've prepared for sales teams in the past.
And when they use it, what's the right mechanism for them to learn on the fly and use on the fly. I think that's also very different.
Really? Like how so?
Well, so if we think about it, CS have an existing relationship that they have nurtured with their clients, right? With the client contacts. And so there is probably a little bit more of a understanding and leeway of, I actually don't know this. Let me get back to you on this, right? And so when that were to happen, then is it a case of a piece of content that they can actually respond with right away? Or is it a piece of content that allows them to respond back with a little bit more depth to continue to increase that trust and to continue to nurture that trust?
So this is like actually kind of similar to what you were talking about in terms of building battle cards for proposal teams. Sometimes you might be able to build your content out in a way that doesn't have to be as conversational, because it could be sent via email. You know, it's really interesting. Also, when we did that sales survey the other year, one of the questions was around like, when are you looking at your battle cards? Are you looking at them before the demo with the customer? Are you keeping them open during the demo? Are you using them after? And there was a surprising number. It was way higher than we thought. I think maybe it was a majority of people were using battle cards after demo for their email follow-up. Yeah, like it was a surprising number that we didn't expect. We thought it was more like prep for a demo, more like during a demo being able to handle objections and stuff. But there's a large amount of salespeople that were using battle cards as well to respond, probably in a similar way, to questions that they weren't able to respond to during the call. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
And then the way that we think about that type of situation is that the content needs to be both a mix of suggestions and being highly prescriptive. So where I would think about being highly prescriptive is, are there specific words or phrases that you would need to use in order to properly position the competition? If so, then we want to be highly prescriptive of those words and explain why in the content. And then on the other side, the types of content and the phrases that are suggestive, like this is how you can talk about it, those are type of words and phrases that you want the CS person or even the sales rep as a follow-up to put it into their own words, right? And that it's okay to explain it in a way that's not tightly created and tightly bound. And those are situations where you really explain the why, right? That the whys really could be highly personalized and should be personalized.
Okay, let's move on to the last question, unless there's anything else you want to add to that one. You're good?
Let's keep going.
Okay. What are best practices on updating battle cards with a frequency that keeps stakeholders engaging regularly with the battle cards? Alternatively, maybe the intent of battle cards isn't regular engagement, and maybe that might be the purpose of the news feed.
So Katie, I think you have an opinion on this one. I'll let you answer this one and I'll tell you.
Yeah, I do have. What was my opinion on this one? Okay. My opinion was, we were talking about this earlier, is your objective in building battle cards to get salespeople to look at them frequently? Or is your objective in building battle cards to build confidence in your sales reps so that they're more confident when they're navigating a competitor in a deal? And like, to me, the idea is, if the content that you've built for your sales teams is making them confident, they shouldn't have to go back to it all the time, right? Like, you're trying to serve a function of making them better equipped to navigate competitors in deals. That's one side of things in the way that I'd look at it. I wouldn't necessarily say constant engagement in your battle cards is what you want. Maybe really good content that makes a confident team means that they're not going to keep going back to it unless things are like frequently changing in your market. On the other side of that, what I do think the importance around updating your content frequently is that it's about building trust with your salespeople. So like, if you are not updating your battle cards frequently, and your sales team is going to go in and they're going to see that these battle cards are out of date, you're going to start to build a brand that your content's out of date. Then you're not going to have people engaging with it anymore, because now there's just going to be an assumption that there's nothing useful in there for me. Those were like some of my thoughts. I don't know if I had other thoughts that I shared with you before that I forget.
I think we talked about that a lot, right? Which is primarily, it's about trust between the CI team, product marketing team, and then sales people and customer facing teams. What is the right frequency that will continue that and build that on that trust? And what is the breaking point where the going beyond that particular cadence and frequency will deteriorate that trust? And so there is going to be a lot of cases where a particular battle card content or a particular card is not going to change over time or change all that frequently. The question is, how do you keep that up to keep a perception that it's being up to date? Because you want people to know that this has been looked at and checked and that it's still relevant, and that it simply just hasn't changed. So one of the tips that I actually have for a lot of people I talk to is just to be clear that last updated was this particular date, but this is still relevant as of today, right? So that people can actually look at it and say, okay, I realize this is now still relevant, and let me find something else that I've just learned about or something that I haven't seen before.
Yeah, I think there was another, sort of layer to this question, or maybe intention behind asking it, which was about what is the mechanism that you're going to use to get people to come back to engage with your content? Maybe one of the ideas being, if I'm if I'm updating my battle cards all the time, will that train salespeople to know that they should keep coming back in to look at the content? Or should I be using something like a newsletter to provide those updates? And to me, interested in your thought on this, it kind of goes back to what I said before. You don't necessarily need to train people to be coming back into your battle cards all the time, but maybe you do want to utilize newsletters when there are important updates and you want your salespeople to go back and then re-equip themselves with new information, because it's important enough that if they're holding old information and trying to use that, they're going to be seen as like really out of date with the market. But I don't think necessarily like your mechanism for getting engagement needs to be updating frequently. And I think that the purpose of updating your battle cards frequently is, to your point, Vincent, it's about trust building.
Agreed. I think the mechanism to bring people back into updated battle cards, updated content, could be a frequency of updates where the sales reps and customer facing teams are used to just coming back on a regular basis. But it could be something else. It could be a newsletter. It could be a different way of enabling it. For example, in my old company, we had both a dedicated CIA newsletter, and we also had snippets of it being pushed into the sales enablement newsletter that's also sent out on a weekly basis. So we use multiple avenues for that.
Interesting. Did you ever use any other ways to get people to come in, look at battle cards when something important happened other than newsletters?
One of the things I think was most effective for me was right off the bat when I'm doing any sort of competitive enablement session and training is to bookend the session with, this is where you go. This is where you go. You go into this particular place or platform or clue, wherever else you're keeping your most up-to-date battle cards, so that people just get that behavior built in as early as possible.
Make it normal to go through and find them. I see. Cool. Those were all of the questions that we had. So I think that's all that we had to cover today. There are a couple of other questions that came up that I think we'll end up building some additional content on. Vincent, we chatted about this. One is around depositioning and some other, we're doing like a bit of a deeper dive into what is depositioning and how do you do that, like some tactical maybe examples of like a battle card deep dive into that.
Yep.
And then the second, which is a question that has come up a lot and it makes a lot of sense, is around how to structure your like competitors in different tiers, and then additionally how to structure battle cards, especially when you're working with competitors that are competing against different product lines, and it can get very complex. So I think there's some work that we can do in the future to share maybe some advice on that.
Right. I think that particular question is about how do I keep myself sane when there are all kinds of long tail competitors that we think are coming into play that we have to acknowledge and deal with.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. How do I keep this manageable?
That's right.
Great. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we will obviously be sharing more content on some of the stuff in the future. So thanks for this. And thanks, Vincent, for answering these questions.
It's always fun.